The rain poured relentlessly as thunder rumbled in the distance. Jake, a 19-year-old pizza delivery boy, sighed as he glanced at the clock in his car. It was nearly midnight, and he had just one more delivery to make before his shift ended. He stared at the crumpled piece of paper with the address on it, an old, abandoned-looking house on the outskirts of town. The address was unfamiliar, and a chill ran down his spine as he read it. Reluctantly, Jake started the car and drove through the dark, empty streets. The GPS guided him to a narrow, winding road leading to the old mansion. As he approached, the house loomed out of the darkness like a sinister giant. Its windows were broken, and the paint was peeling off the walls. The garden was overgrown with weeds, and the whole place gave off an eerie, foreboding vibe. Jake parked the car and grabbed the pizza box. He took a deep breath and walked towards the front door, which creaked open before he could even knock. The sudden movement made his heart race. He stepped inside cautiously, calling out, "Hello." "Pizza delivery." There was no response. The hallway was dimly lit, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling and dust covering every surface. As Jake ventured further into the house, the door slammed shut behind him with a loud bang. He spun around, trying the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic started to set in. "Hello," he called again, louder this time. "Is anyone here?" A faint whisper echoed through the hallway, sending shivers down his spine. In the living room, Jake followed the voice, clutching the pizza box tightly. The living room was just as decrepit as the rest of the house, with old, tattered furniture and a musty smell. In the center of the room stood a woman with long, white hair and a hauntingly pale face. Her eyes were hollow, and her lips curled into a sinister smile. "Thank you for the pizza," she said in a voice that sounded like it came from another world. Jake tried to hand her the pizza box, but his hands were shaking so badly that he almost dropped it. The woman took the box and placed it on a table. Her movements were slow and deliberate, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman tilted her head and stared at him with those hollow eyes. "Everything is as it should be," she replied cryptically. "But you, young man, should not have come here." Jake's heart pounded in his chest. "I was just delivering the pizza. I'll be on my way now." He turned to leave, but the door to the living room slammed shut on its own. The woman let out a chilling laugh that echoed through the room. "I'm afraid you can't leave," she said. "Not until you've met the others." "The others," Jake repeated, his voice trembling. The woman nodded and clapped her hands. The shadows in the room seemed to come to life, forming into ghostly figures. They surrounded Jake, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. He backed away, his mind racing with fear and confusion. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What do you want from me?" The woman stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "We are the lost souls of this house," she explained. "Trapped here for eternity, and now, so are you." Jake's blood ran cold. "No, this can't be happening." The ghosts closed in on him, their cold, clammy hands reaching out to touch him. He tried to fight them off, but his efforts were futile. The room began to spin, and he felt himself being pulled into a dark, endless void. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the living room. He was in a small, windowless room with stone walls and a heavy, iron door. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the only light came from a single, flickering candle. Jake stumbled to his feet, his mind racing. "Where am I?" he shouted. "Let me out." A voice echoed from the darkness, sending chills down his spine. "You are in the heart of the house," it said, "where all the lost souls are kept." Jake's eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the voice. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" A figure emerged from the shadows, and Jake recognized the woman with the white hair and pale face. "I am the guardian of this house," she said. "And you are now a part of it?" Jake's heart sank. "Please, there must be a way out." The woman shook her head slowly. "There is no escape," she said. "Once you enter this house, you become one of us? Forever." Desperation clawed at Jake's mind. He couldn't accept his fate. There had to be a way out. He began to search the room frantically, hoping to find anything that could help him escape. But the room was empty, save for the candle and the iron door. The woman watched him with a cold, detached expression. "Your efforts are in vain," she said. "Accept your fate and join us." Jake ignored her, determined to find a way out. He pounded on the iron door, shouting for help, but there was no response. The only sound was the echo of his own voice. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time had no meaning in this place. Jake was exhausted, his hope dwindling with each passing moment. He slumped against the wall, his mind racing with thoughts of escape and the life he had left behind. Then, a faint glimmer of light caught his eye. He turned to see a small, hidden door in the corner of the room. It was barely visible, covered in dust and grime. Jake's heart raced with renewed hope as he crawled towards it. He pushed the door open, revealing a narrow, winding staircase that led upwards. Without a second thought, he began to climb, the sense of urgency driving him forward. The stairs seemed to go on forever, but he didn't stop. He had to get out of this place. Finally, he reached the top of the staircase and found himself in the attic of the house. The air was cold and damp, and the only light came from a small, broken window. But it was enough to give him hope. Jake crossed the attic, searching for a way out. He found a trapdoor in the floor and pulled it open, revealing another staircase leading down. He descended quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. As he reached the bottom, he found himself in the main hallway of the house. The front door was just ahead. He ran towards it, but just as he reached out to open it, the door burst open, and the woman appeared, blocking his path. "You can't leave," she said, her voice cold and final. Jake backed away, his mind racing. "Please, I just want to go home." The woman shook her head. "This is your home now." Desperation and anger surged through Jake. He couldn't accept this. He had to fight. With a burst of adrenaline, he lunged at the woman, hoping to push past her and escape. But, as he touched her, a jolt of electricity shot through his body, and he was thrown back, landing hard on the floor. The woman stepped closer, her expression unchanged. "You can't escape your fate," she said. "You belong to the house now." Jake's vision blurred as pain racked his body. He could feel himself slipping into unconsciousness, but he fought to stay awake. He couldn't give up, not yet. Then, a voice echoed in his mind, a whisper of hope. "There is a way out," it said. "But it requires a sacrifice." Jake's eyes snapped open, and he looked around, trying to find the source of the voice. "What do you mean?" he whispered. The voice was faint but clear. "You must destroy the heart of the house," it said. "Only then will you be free." Jake's mind raced. The heart of the house, what could that be? He thought back to the stories he had heard about haunted house show. They often had a central object or place that held their power. He had to find it. With renewed determination, Jake pushed himself to his feet and ran deeper into the house. The woman followed him, her cold eyes watching his every move. He searched room after room, looking for anything that could be the heart of the house. Finally, he found himself in a small, hidden chamber deep within the house. In the center of the room was an old, ornate mirror, its surface cracked and covered in dust. Jake's instincts told him that this was at the heart of the house. He grabbed a heavy, iron candlestick from the floor and raised it above his head. With all his strength, he brought it down on the mirror. The glass shattered, and a deafening scream echoed through the house. The woman appeared in the doorway, her face contorted with rage. "No," she screamed, "you can't." But it was too late. The mirror was destroyed, and with it, the power that held the house together. The walls began to crumble, and the floor shook violently. Jake felt himself being pulled into a dark, swirling vortex. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground outside the house. The sun was rising, casting a warm, golden light over the ruins of the mansion. He took a deep breath, the fresh air filling his lungs. He was free. Jake stumbled to his feet, his body aching from the ordeal. He looked back at the house one last time before turning and walking away. He didn't know what the future held, but he was grateful to be alive. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had left a part of himself behind. In that house, a part that would always be haunted by the memories of that night. But he knew he had to move forward and leave the past behind. And as the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, Jake made a promise to himself. He would never forget the lessons he had learned. He would cherish every moment, and he would never take life for granted, because he knew, better than anyone, how quickly it could all be taken away. As Jake made his way back to town, his steps were heavy, and his mind was a whirl of thoughts and emotions. The events of the night felt surreal, as if he had been trapped in a nightmare, but the pain in his body and the remnants of fear in his heart told him it had all been very real. When he finally reached the edge of town, the familiar sights and sounds of civilization brought a sense of relief. He headed straight to his apartment, desperate for the comfort and safety of his own space. Once inside, he locked the door behind him and collapsed onto the couch, his body and mind exhausted. Jake knew he needed to report what had happened, but he also knew that no one would believe him. He could barely believe it himself. He decided to take a shower, hoping the warm water would help wash away the lingering terror. As he stood under the spray, he closed his eyes and tried to clear his mind. However, images of the haunted house and the woman with the pale face kept flashing before him. The voices of the lost souls echoed in his ears, and he could still feel their cold touch on his skin. He finished his shower quickly, wrapping himself in a towel and heading to bed. Sleep did not come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman's haunting smile and heard her chilling laugh. He tossed and turned, unable to escape the memories. When he finally drifted off, his sleep was filled with nightmares of being trapped in the house, unable to escape. The next morning, Jake awoke feeling just as tired as when he had gone to bed. He knew he couldn't avoid dealing with what had happened, but he also knew he needed help. He decided to confide in his best friend, Mark, hoping that sharing his experience would help him make sense of it. Jake called Mark and asked him to come over. When Mark arrived, Jake hesitated for a moment before telling him everything. Mark listened intently, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. "Jake, are you sure you're okay?" Mark asked when Jake finished. I don't even know what to say." "I know it sounds crazy," Jake admitted. "But it happened, Mark. I don't know how to explain it, but I was there. I saw and felt everything." Mark leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe we should go to the police. Or at least talk to someone who knows about this kind of stuff." Jake shook his head. "The police won't believe me. They'll think I'm making it up or that I had a bad dream. But maybe there's someone who can help us understand what happened." Mark agreed to help Jake research local legends and paranormal experts. They spent the day poring over books and websites, looking for any information that might explain the haunted house and the woman. After hours of searching, they found a reference to an old legend about a woman named Eliza, who had lived in the house over a century ago. According to the legend, Eliza had been a beautiful and kind-hearted woman who fell in love with a man named Thomas. However, Thomas was already engaged to another woman, and when Eliza found out, she was heartbroken. In her despair, she turned to dark magic, hoping to win Thomas's love. Instead, she accidentally bound her soul to the house, trapping herself and anyone who entered within its walls. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he read the story. "Do you think it's possible?" he asked Mark. "Could Eliza still be trapped in that house?" Mark shrugged. "It's as good an explanation as any. But if she is, how do we free her?" Jake thought for a moment. "The voice said I needed to destroy the heart of the house. I thought it was the mirror, but maybe there's something more. Maybe Eliza herself is the key." They decided to visit the ruins of the house again, hoping to find more clues. As they approached the site, Jake felt a familiar sense of dread. The house was in even worse condition than before, with parts of the roof caved in and walls crumbling. They carefully made their way inside, stepping over debris and broken furniture. In the living room, they found the shattered mirror. Jake stared at the pieces, trying to remember anything that might help. Suddenly, he felt a cold breeze and turned to see a faint, ghostly figure standing in the doorway. It was Eliza. "Why have you returned?" she asked, her voice filled with sorrow. "We want to help you," Jake said, stepping forward. "We know about your story, and we want to find a way to free you." Eliza's eyes softened, and she floated closer. "I have been trapped here for so long," she whispered. "But my fate is tied to this house. There is only one way to break the curse." "How?" Jake asked eagerly. Eliza looked at him with sad eyes. "You must find my locket. It holds the last piece of my soul. Destroy it, and you will free me and the other souls trapped here." Jake and Mark searched the house, looking for any sign of the locket. They finally found it hidden in a small, secret compartment in the attic. The locket was old and tarnished, but it still held a faint, ethereal glow. "Are you sure about this?" Mark asked, holding the locket. Jake nodded. "We have to try." They took the locket outside and placed it on a large stone. Jake picked up a heavy rock and, with a deep breath, brought it down on the locket. The moment the locket shattered, a blinding light enveloped the house. Jake and Mark shielded their eyes, feeling a surge of energy pass through them. When the light faded, the house was gone. In its place was an empty field, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Jake felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing that Eliza and the other souls were finally free. He turned to Mark, who was looking around in awe. "I think we did it," Jake said, smiling. Mark nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Yeah, I think we did." As they walked back to town, Jake felt lighter than he had in days. The memories of the haunted house would always be with him, but now they were a reminder of his strength and resilience. He had faced his fears and come out the other side stronger. And as he looked towards the future, Jake knew he could face whatever came his way, because he had already faced the darkness and emerged victorious.